This is week 4, unit 1, and it's our introduction to the study of the Jewish people. And every week we begin our study by looking at a particular building that sums up or encapsulates the culture that we're looking at that week. And this week we're not looking at a building, we're looking at a place, the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. And the reason for this is that the building that was originally built on the Temple Mount of Jerusalem is no longer there. The Hebrew temple no longer exists. What is there in its place, as we see in this aerial view of the Temple Mount as it appears today, is a Muslim mosque. The Dome of the Rock is the most sort of prominent building on Temple Mount. And this relates to the history of the Jewish people, the history of Jerusalem, and the history of the Temple Mount. Well, the Temple Mount is the site originally of the first temple built by King Solomon, and it's thought that this temple was built in the 10th century BCE, and it was destroyed in the 6th century BCE when the Babylonians conquered Jerusalem. A second temple was built later in the 6th century BCE, and that temple stood until 70 AD when it was destroyed by the Romans, who were punishing a Jewish revolt and destroyed the city of Jerusalem and expelled the Jews from Jerusalem, as the Babylonians had done earlier. So twice temples were built on Temple Mount in the center of Jerusalem, and twice they were torn down. Temple Mount is a sacred place for the Jewish people. It is also a sacred place for the Muslim people. It has been a sacred place also for Roman religion and for Christian people. So it is arguably the most sacred place in the whole world. 4 different religions, 3 of them still very much active today, see this place as particularly holy and particularly sacred. Why is this so? There are many legends and myths and traditions that go back that show that this place has a particular connection between the human and the divine. Some traditions say that this is the site where God picked up the earth to create Adam, so it's connected in that sense with the creation of humanity. Jews, Muslims, and Christians all agree that this is the site where Abraham was told to sacrifice his son Isaac. And if you recall that story from the Old Testament in the Bible, Abraham is told by God to sacrifice his son Isaac to show how much he will be obedient to God. He will sacrifice the thing that matters most to him in the world, which is his son. He is about to do this when God holds his hand and says, no, Abraham, don't actually sacrifice your son. I've seen that what you are willing to do, but you don't have to go through that loss. A just God would not ask that of you. And so another moment of deep and powerful connection between the divine and the human here. Muslims also believe that this is the site where Muhammad, the prophet, made his ascent to heaven on his night journey. This was an event in Muhammad's life where he was raptured up to heaven and given direct sight and experience of heaven so that he could have instructions for prayer that he could bring to the Muslim people. And Muslim tradition says that this is the place where Muhammad went from earth to heaven. So again, a powerful connection between the human and the divine in all these various traditions. Well, this is the Dome of the Rock Mosque, which was built on top of the rock on which it was believed that Abraham intended to sacrifice Isaac, and also where Muhammad made his journey. And this has been there since the Muslim conquest of Jerusalem in the 7th century AD. It's the most prominent building on the Temple Mount today, but it's a deeply controversial building because it's built on the site of the Jewish temples. Here we see what is known as the Western Wall, formerly called at times the Wailing Wall. This is a wall that remains of the original retaining wall for the Temple Mount that was built by King Herod sometime around 19 BCE, so near the beginning of the Christian era in terms of dating. And it is the oldest surviving fragment of architecture or building that remains today on Temple Mount. And it's also thought to have been close to the actual structure of the temple that was destroyed in 70 AD, the Second Temple. And for both of these reasons, it has great significance as a site for Jewish prayer. It is the one piece left of the structures that were built around the temple that was destroyed in 70 AD by the Romans. And so this has been a place of Jewish pilgrimage and prayer for many years, and certainly after the establishment of the State of Israel and after the Israeli conquest of Jerusalem in 1967, this has been a central focus for Jewish prayer and is one of the most sacred sites of any religion, and a very sacred site in the Jewish religion. Here are pictures of prayers that have been put into the chinks of the Western Wall. This is a way of endorsing your prayer, of making your prayer, bringing your prayer's attention to God, is to write it and put it in the wall in this. So you're actually putting yourself in this sacred place, which has such a deep connection between the human and the divine. Many observant Jews will not walk on Temple Mount to this day because they believe that somewhere on Temple Mount is the site of the Holy of Holies, the most sacred place in the temple. They don't know where that is. Only certain people under Jewish tradition are allowed to enter the Holy of Holies, and it would be blasphemous for someone to enter that space by mistake, even though the temple is no longer there. Not all Jews follow this rule, but many do. Here is a model of Solomon's temple, the first temple, as it might have been when it was originally built. The evidence for Solomon's temple is entirely from the Hebrew Bible, and this is both good and bad in terms of evidence. On the one hand, it's in the Bible and it's described in great detail. On the other hand, biblical texts, as we know, are often symbolic as well as literal, and so without the corroboration of archaeological evidence, it's hard to know exactly what the temple looked like. But we do have the description in the Bible, and presumably it is symbolically and possibly also literally accurate as to how the temple was built. And here is a plan of the temple based on this. There's a vestibule, the holy place or greater house, and then the Holy of Holies. And it's important to realize that if you're coming from another tradition other than the Jewish tradition, that the temple is not just sort of a church where you go to pray. It is a place where the priest can actually contact God. It is the one place on earth where this can be done. And the Holy of Holies is something... It's a place for human beings to interact directly with God, and only certain human beings can do this under certain circumstances. And this is at the root of the significance that the temple is given. And in Jewish history, there's a huge transition, a huge wrenching transition, when Judaism goes from being a place-centered religion, which is based very much on the unique place of the temple in Jerusalem, and then becomes, because of the Roman conquest in AD 70, becomes a religion that doesn't have a temple, that doesn't have its most sacred place, and thus has to reconfigure how human beings can relate to the divine in the absence of this one place that provides a physical space for that connection. And we'll finish our look at the Temple Mount with a juxtaposition here of the way that the Mount appears today and the model of the Mount in Solomon's time. The place remains the same, but the context of it is vastly different. And a place that was once sacred to one religion is now sacred to three religions and is occupied by religious buildings from two religions. There could be no better indication of the complexities of the modern Middle East and of different structures of feeling and belief.